The air was thick with the scent of old wood and dust that morning when I unlocked the front door of my father's house for what I thought would be the last time. The same brass handle I had gripped since childhood was now cold and foreign in my hand, a symbol of how much had changed since he passed. I had returned home to finalize the estate, the house, the land, the little workshop behind the barn, everything my father had built over a lifetime of sacrifice. He had worked with his bare hands, raising 2 sons from nothing, teaching us to be men of honesty and hard work. Or at least, that's what I believed. My younger brother Daniel had been the golden child, charming, confident, and always one step ahead when it came to winning hearts. He had a way of smiling through deceit, something I realized far too late. When our father died, I didn't expect a battle. I expected grief, shared tears, maybe even a few quiet moments of nostalgia. But Daniel had other plans. The lawyer's office smelled of stale coffee and carpet cleaner. Papers shuffled as the old man adjusted his glasses, clearing his throat before reading my father's will. I remember gripping the armrest of my chair, the sound of rain tapping against the window. According to this document, the lawyer said carefully, the house, workshop, and all financial assets are to be transferred to Daniel Richards. I blinked. I must have misheard. That's impossible, I said, leaning forward. There must be some mistake. My father told me, but Daniel was already smirking. He reached into his jacket and placed another paper on the table. I had the will updated last year, he said smoothly. Dad wanted me to handle everything. You've had your own life? The lawyer looked uncomfortable, flipping through pages, but I could see the signature. My father's handwriting, or what looked like it, scrawled at the bottom. My stomach dropped. I felt the air leave the room. Dad never told me about this, I whispered. Daniel shrugged. He probably didn't want to hurt you. The words stung more than a slap. It wasn't about the money. It was about the betrayal, the lie, the years of trust crumbling in an instant. I stormed out of that office without saying another word. My shoes splashed through puddles as thunder rolled in the distance. For the first time in my life, I realized my brother wasn't the man I thought he was. He wasn't family anymore, a life rebuilt from ashes. The next few years were hard. I lost my home, my inheritance, my connection to everything I once knew. I was too proud to beg, too broken to start over easily. For months, I lived out of a small rented room above a hardware store, working odd jobs to survive. At night, I'd lie awake thinking about my father's hands, scarred, calloused, steady. He had built everything from nothing. And now it was gone, stolen by his own son. But there was one thing Daniel didn't take from me, my determination. I decided to rebuild not just my finances, but my life. I started small. I found work as a mechanic, fixing engines and saving every dollar I could. I didn't have friends anymore, just purpose. Each wrench turn, each repaired motor felt like a quiet rebellion against the injustice I had suffered. Then, one night, as I was closing up the shop, a man pulled in with a broken generator. His company was expanding, and he needed quick help. I fixed it within an hour. Impressed, he offered me a contract. That was the beginning of something big. Within a year, I was managing a small team. Within 3, I had started my own repair business, honest, efficient, and growing fast. My hands that once trembled with anger now worked with precision and calm, but deep down, the wound never healed. Every success reminded me of what had been stolen, and every night I imagined Daniel, living in the house that wasn't his, spending the money he didn't earn. I told myself I had moved on, but revenge has a way of waiting, quiet, patient, like a predator in the dark. The reunion I didn't expect. 10 years passed before I saw Daniel again. It was at a funeral, our mother's. The church smelled of lilies and regret. I stood at the back, watching as Daniel greeted guests with the same polished smile I remembered. Time had been kind to him, designer suit, expensive watch, but his eyes had a hollowness I hadn't seen before. When the service ended, he approached me. "Didn't expect you to show up," he said, forcing a smile. "I wasn't going to," I replied. "But she deserved at least that much." He nodded, looking uncomfortable. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice. I know things were rough between us, but maybe it's time we move past it. Family's all we've got. I stared at him, the man who had stolen everything, and forced a small smile. Sure, I said quietly. Let's move past it. He looked relieved. He didn't know what those words really meant. Because that night, as I stood over our mother's grave, I made myself a silent promise. I would take back what he stole. Every dollar, every ounce of pride, every piece of respect he'd stripped from me, and I wouldn't just take it back. I'd make him wish he'd never crossed me. Seeds of a new game over the next few months. I did what I did best. Watched, listened, planned. Through an old mutual friend, I learned that Daniel's company, a real estate venture, was in trouble. Bad trouble. Loans, unpaid investors, internal corruption. He was desperate for a financial partner to save him, and that's when I saw my opening. I set up a new firm under a different name. Nothing flashy, just professional enough to look legitimate. I had enough capital saved to make an offer he couldn't refuse. When we finally met for the business proposal, Daniel didn't even recognize me at first. Age and time had reshaped my face, but not my memory. He extended his hand. "Pleasure to meet you," he said politely. I took it, feeling the irony burn through my chest. "Pleasure's all mine," I replied. That was the beginning of the game, one that would end with him kneeling before the brother he betrayed. The day I re-entered Daniel's life, he had no idea the man shaking his hand across that polished oak table was the same brother he'd robbed years ago. He looked older, not just from time, but from the kind of stress that eats away at a man's soul. His confident smile was still there, but it was painted over cracks of exhaustion. "Your company's reputation precedes you," he said, pouring coffee into crystal cups. "We're looking for someone to help us expand into new properties." "There's a lot of money to be made," I smiled back, hiding the storm in my chest. "Yes," I said smoothly, "but there's also a lot to lose if one isn't careful." He laughed, mistaking my warning for wit. "Then we're in good hands." If only he knew the foundation of revenge over the next few months. I invested carefully into his company. Not too much, just enough to gain access to financial reports, internal accounts, and board meetings. Every time Daniel boasted about his business genius, I nodded politely, all while quietly uncovering the rot beneath the surface. His books were a disaster. Falsified invoices, hidden debts, fake clients. The same charm he once used to deceive our father had now become his downfall. I didn't expose him immediately. No, that would have been mercy. And mercy was something I no longer believed in. Instead, I began buying out the debts his company owed, anonymously through third-party firms. With every silent transaction, I became his invisible creditor. He thought he was digging himself out of a hole. But he was only digging deeper, right into my trap. One night, while reviewing the latest reports in my office, I found something poetic. Daniel had mortgaged the family home, the very one he stole from me, to cover his company's latest shortfall. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. The house where we grew up. The place where he betrayed me. Now it was collateral in my hands. "The reunion of Lie's business is booming," Daniel said over lunch one afternoon, his grin wide and hollow. "You've been a great partner. I knew I could trust you." Trust. That word hit differently coming from him. "I'm glad," I said evenly, stirring my coffee. "But tell me, Daniel, what would you do if things suddenly went wrong again?" He laughed, waving a dismissive hand. "That won't happen. I've learned my lessons." "Oh, you have no idea," I thought. I excused myself early that day and walked along the city street, the golden lights reflecting off glass towers. Somewhere deep inside, the younger version of me, the broken, betrayed son, whispered that revenge wouldn't bring peace. But I silenced that voice. This wasn't about peace anymore. This was about balance. When the storm hit 3 months later, Daniel's empire began to crumble. The market dipped, his investors pulled out, and the fake numbers he'd been juggling came crashing down. Desperate, he turned to me for help. He showed up at my office late one evening, tie loosened, eyes wild. "We need an emergency loan," he said, voice trembling. "Just a short-term infusion. I can make it all right again." I looked up from my desk, feigning concern. "I see," I said. "And how much are we talking?" "2 million, he said quickly. It's nothing for someone like you, someone like me. If only he knew who I was. I tapped my pen on the desk. You understand, Daniel, that such loans require collateral. I'd need control of your company until repayment. He hesitated, desperation flashing across his face. Then he nodded. Fine, whatever it takes. That was the moment I owned him. The ink was barely dry on the contract when I leaned back in my chair, staring at his signature, the same signature that once stole my inheritance, now giving me everything he owned. The unmasking weeks later, I called for a private board meeting. Daniel walked in, pale and weary. He didn't know the company was no longer his. As everyone settled, I stood up. There's been a change in management, I said calmly. Effective immediately, I am assuming full control of the company. Confusion rippled across the table. Daniel frowned. What are you talking about? I slid the file across to him. Your collateral agreement. You failed to meet the repayment deadline. He flipped through the pages, his face draining of color. This can't be legal. Oh, it's perfectly legal, I said. You signed it yourself. He looked up, shaking. Who are you, really? For a moment I let the silence stretch. Then I smiled. Slow, deliberate, cold. I'm the man you once called your brother. The room froze. Daniel's jaw dropped. His hand trembled as he gripped the table edge. No, he whispered. That's not possible. Oh, but it is, I said. You took everything from me, the house, the inheritance, the life that was mine. And now I've taken everything from you. The other board members stared in stunned silence. Daniel sank into his chair, broken. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to satisfaction. The fall of a thief, Daniel tried to fight back. He hired lawyers, called in favors, pleaded with old investors. But it was too late. His debts were real, his signature was binding, and his empire had already been absorbed by me. He came to see me one last time. I found him waiting outside my office building, standing in the rain, soaked and defeated. The man who once flaunted wealth now looked like a ghost. Why? He asked quietly. Why didn't you just tell me who you were? Would it have changed anything? I asked. He looked down, silent. I stepped closer, my voice low. You stole from me when I had nothing? You left me to start over from ashes. And now you'll do the same, except you'll do it working for me. His head snapped up. What? I handed him an envelope. Inside was a job offer, manager of one of the subsidiary branches. Consider it poetic justice, I said. You'll work for the company you once owned. You'll build for me what I built for you. He stared at the paper, eyes wet with disbelief. You're cruel, I shook my head. No, Daniel, I'm fair. A quiet victory. Months later, Daniel sat behind a small desk in a warehouse office, signing paperwork and making phone calls. His pride was gone, his arrogance replaced by silent humility. Sometimes I watched from afar, not out of glee, but reflection. I had won. I had everything. Yet there was an emptiness I couldn't shake. Revenge had filled the cracks, but it hadn't healed them. One evening, I drove to our father's grave. The sky was burning orange with sunset. I stood there for a long while, looking at the stone, the name engraved deep into it. I got it all back, I whispered. Everything he took. The wind rustled the leaves, soft and indifferent. As I turned to leave, I thought I heard my father's voice in the breeze. Quiet, steady. You both lost, my son, and for the first time, I realized maybe he was right. The price of victory, the night I took full control of the company, I didn't celebrate. No champagne, no congratulations, just silence. The city lights shimmered outside my office window, but they didn't feel bright anymore. My reflection stared back at me, older, colder, and lonelier. For years, I had dreamed of this moment. I imagined feeling alive, vindicated, powerful. Instead, all I felt was empty. That's the thing about revenge. It fills your hands, but empties your heart. The consequence of winning. A few weeks later, one of my employees came to my office door, nervous. Sir, there's someone waiting to see you. He says it's urgent. I didn't need to ask who it was. When I walked into the lobby, Daniel was there. Thinner, paler, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in weeks. He looked at me, not with anger this time, but with shame. "I came to say thank you," he said softly. I frowned. "Thank me? For what?" "For not destroying me completely," he replied. "You could have taken more. But you didn't. You gave me work. You gave me a chance to live." For a moment neither of us spoke. "You really think that's mercy?" I asked quietly. He smiled weakly. "Maybe not mercy. Maybe guilt." The words hit me harder than I expected, because deep down, he wasn't wrong. The mirror moment. After Daniel left, I sat at my desk, staring at the contract he'd signed months ago. His signature sat there like a wound, proof that I'd won, but also proof that I'd become exactly like him. I remembered the day he stole my inheritance. How confident he looked, how betrayed I felt, how cold his eyes were when he said, "It's just business." And now, I had said the same words to him. Maybe vengeance had turned me into the very thing I despised. That night I couldn't sleep. I found myself driving without direction until I reached the old family house, the one I'd repossessed through his debts. The gate creaked as I walked in. Every step echoed with memories, our laughter, our fights, our father's voice calling us to dinner. Inside, everything smelled of dust and time. And then I saw it, our old photograph on the mantel, two young boys smiling, arms around each other, oblivious to the war that adulthood would bring. My throat tightened. For the first time in years, I sat down and cried. The letter. A few days later, I received an envelope. No sender name, just my address written in Daniel's shaky handwriting. Inside there was a letter. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was honest. "I don't expect forgiveness," he wrote, "but I want you to know, when I stole from you, I thought I was saving myself. I didn't realize I was losing the only family I had left. I've been paying that price ever since." At the bottom, he had written one more line. "If you ever find it in your heart to forgive me, I'll be waiting." I read it twice, then 3 times, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger, just sadness and peace. The choice weeks turned into months. Daniel kept working quietly in the branch office. He never complained, never asked for more, never missed a day, and one evening, I made a decision. I visited his office unannounced. He looked surprised to see me. "I've been reviewing your performance," I said, placing a folder on his desk. "You've done good work." "Better than I expected." He nodded slowly, unsure what to say. "I'm giving you back partial ownership," I said finally. "You'll manage this branch as a partner, not an employee." His eyes widened. "Why?" "Because some debts," I said softly, "can't be paid in money, only in peace." Tears filled his eyes, and for the first time since we were kids, he smiled, genuinely. It wasn't the smile of arrogance or victory. It was a smile of understanding. The real inheritance. Months later, I found myself visiting our father's grave again. This time I wasn't alone. Daniel stood beside me, silent, hands clasped. We stood there for a long time before he finally whispered, "He'd be proud of you." I shook my head. "No, Daniel. He'd be proud of us." And for the first time, I realized something important. Revenge had given me control, but forgiveness gave me freedom. As we walked away from the graveyard, the sun broke through the clouds, warm and golden. It felt like a beginning. The final twist 6 months later, I received a call from the bank. Apparently, a new investor had quietly bought shares in my parent company, enough to hold 10% of the business. The name on the file? Daniel. When I called him, he laughed softly. "You didn't think I'd just stop learning, did you?" I smiled. "Guess some habits run in the family." He chuckled. "Maybe this time we can build something together." For the first time in our lives, that didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like hope. In the end, revenge gave me satisfaction, but forgiveness gave me peace. And sometimes that's the real double you take back.